Okay, we're recording. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm gonna run through our intro real quick so we can get it on YouTube because I don't edit video. Um, so you just have to say, I'm here with Laura. For those listening on the podcast, I can't see Laura's smiling face. And we're doing a Q&A episode today because we haven't done one in forever. It's been like 2 months.
Forever.
Um, forever. Forever. Sorry, Sandlot. Anyway, so real quick, what's happening administratively in the Dialogue Doctor? If you want to become a bigger part of the community than just listening to the podcast on Monday, go to dialoguedoctor.com, get the free newsletter, comes out every Tuesday morning. We will expound on things in the newsletter that we talk about on the podcast. So for example, the newsletter for this week is going to be me giving examples of what we talk about in dialogue tags. So you don't just have to listen to them. If you sign up for the free newsletter, you can actually see them on Tuesday morning. And then on Wednesday, a bonus episode of the podcast comes out, which is just me ranting about things that we talked about and trying to go a little bit deeper on those things. Or sometimes I take a whole subject. It's really just me picking a subject and talking about it. You can get that for $3 a month on Patreon .com/Jeff Elkins, or you can just go to the dialoguedoctor.com and sign up for it there too. And then if you sign up for that, you get to be part of the Slack channel, which is awesome. The Dialogue Doctor Slack channel is an amazing group of people. And I give an editing prompt. I give a writing prompt every Tuesday, and then Laura gives an editing prompt every Wednesday. So it's a very craft focused community. We're trying to improve our dialogue writing together. Lots of people participate in the prompts. They're a lot of fun. You don't have to participate them to be a part of the community. And I confessed last week to a client that the whole reason I give a dialogue writing prompt is just to trick Laura into giving me editing prompts for my own work. So the editing prompts on Thursday are fantastic, and that's the Slack channel. So go get the free newsletter, dialoguedoctor.com. You also get a free book when you sign up for that on 5 mistakes you're making in your dialogue and how you can fix them. Sign up for the Patreon on Wednesday. You get the bonus episode from the Patreon, and then you can be a part of the Slack channel that is I lost my train of thought. That is Tuesday, Thursday, writing prompt and editing prompt. Super exciting. Go get a part of that. The only other administrative thing I need to cover is that we've picked our book club book. That is Freaky Deaky by Elmore Leonard. I've never read an Elmore Leonard book before, so I'm super excited about reading it. And I actually know nothing about the book except that the title sounds really fun. So go grab Freaky Deaky. In the next couple months, we'll read it. Oh, I forgot. If you're part of the Slack, we also do monthly Zooms. So we're grab a short story, we read a short story together, and then we discuss the dialogue in a Zoom call. So that also happens.
I get to veto or preview the
It's
short
all
fiction.
Flannery O'Connor all the time. We're actually changing the name of this podcast to the Flannery O'Connor podcast.
Mm.
Um,
Again.
Tom and Steph, who we know are our listeners, are now like super excited. They're like,
Mhm.
yes, the Flannery podcast. Um, I would actually be down for that. I could talk about Flannery for a while, but that's not what we're doing. We this week. I think this month we're going to do a sci-fi uh, short story. Looking for some that are in the public domain. So if you got a suggestion, shoot me an email. That'd be great. Um, yeah, or go to dialoguedoctor.com and just contact me that way. That works too. Okay, so that's all I don't think, is there anything I missed? Is there any other administrative
Unless
stuff
you
I
want a
have?
wait list for the workshop that we just did.
Oh, yeah. So we did a character workshop a couple weeks ago where we help you build your cast. We talk all about characterization and character voice. It's 4 hours of teaching and then a 1 hour follow up. And after we did it, we immediately got people asking, like, when are you going to do it again? We're trying to decide because I'm a curmudgeon. So I'll do it again when we get, I don't know, 25 people on the wait list. No, we already have 25 people on the wait list. When we get 35 people on the wait list, I'll do it again. So if you want to be a part of that the next time we do it, go click on the I don't remember
Workshop.
where workshops button on dialoguedoctor.com, and there's a little wait list sign up there. And it doesn't cost you anything to be on the wait list, nor are you required to do anything. It's just putting your name on the list. So go do that. As you sign up for the free newsletter, get on the wait list. Okay. That's enough marketing and selling. Let's get into actually what we're talking about today, which is dialogue tags. The bane of our existence, the he said, she said, in our work that when we've got really snappy, fun, quick dialogue where everybody's passing the hot potato around the table, we have to keep throwing these he said, she said's in there, and they make us sad. But it doesn't have to be that way. Dialogue tags can be an amazing tool for you to use with your writing. So we're gonna talk about the dialogue tags, and we're gonna try to keep it short. You and I promised that we would keep this episode short,
Yes, we promised.
but we're terrible at living up
We're
to those
gonna do it.
promises.
We're gonna put a countdown clock. Can you, is there a Zoom widget with a countdown clock in it?
I don't know, but I would waste time looking for one, which would
That's true.
immediately go against our promise.
We probably should have started with that. All right. I will set my iPhone to a 20-minute stop clock, which will give us a little bit extra time. And
Oh, this will be fun. Let's see how little we can get done in 20 minutes.
all right.
All right. Put that stop clock up. 20 minutes stop clock.
Okay.
Boop, boop, boop,
20
boop.
minutes on the clock.
20 minutes on the clock.
Go.
Pressing start. Go. All right. Laura, talk to me about why you would move a dialogue tag to the front of a expression.
So dialogue tags are a great way of changing the cadence of someone's speech.
Yeah. Totally
So-
not fair for you not to answer my question. Go. Okay. Keep going.
I'm answering your question. You can't tell me. Right.
Reframing my question. It's fine.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, cadence is how a character speaks. So if you have a character who speaks very fast, that would be their cadence. You would most likely put the dialogue tag at the end of what they say. If you have a character who hesitates or speaks more slowly, tends to think about things that they speak, you're going to move your dialogue tag to the beginning of their statement.
Yeah. So you totally reframed my question. It's fine.
I didn't. Your question
answer's
was
better.
Move it to when would you put it at the beginning? I'd put it at
So
the
let's
beginning.
just talk about cadence. And
no, I answered your question. I'd put it at the
did answer my
beginning
question. Fine.
if I wanted to slow somebody down.
Oh man.
Spend our whole 20 minutes arguing with each other.
Fighting with you about the question I asked. I told you this is going to be an exercise in how much of the 20 minutes I could totally waste not talking about dialogue tags. No, I like what you're saying about cadence. And so thinking about dialogue tags globally, because I did start with a very specific question. I should have started with a global one. Thinking about dialogue tags globally, I really like what you're saying, that like something we don't often consider when we're thinking about where we put that dialogue tag in a sentence is how does it help the reader experience with the reader voice? Like how does the reader translate the voice? So like you're saying, if we want a character that sounds faster and quippier and like picks up pace, we want to keep the dialogue tags out of the way and not use them at all, or use them at the end of a sentence if we can, and keep them short, right? Like he said, and that's it. So that dialogue feels snappy. Because I like to think of dialogue tags as like speed bumps, right? Like if you're in the United, I don't know about international listeners, I'm sorry, but in the United States, we do this thing when you're like driving through a residential neighborhood or you're driving through like an apartment complex where you have this like big bump of asphalt in the middle of the road that forces you to slow down. It like makes sure that you're going the appropriate speed limit in that area. And I hate them right now because I'm teaching my teenagers to drive, and they take those things at like full speed, and it's like everyone is like some kind of weird ramp that's going to take the axle off of our car. So anyway, dialogue tags operate like those speed bumps. So if we want a quick fast dialogue tag, we'd put it at the end of the sentence just to keep things moving. But like Laura said, if you want a thoughtful character, you want a character to sound like patient and thoughtful, putting them at the beginning of a expression puts that speed bump, like makes the reader slow down before they hear what the character's saying. Yeah. Any other thoughts on dialogue tags? Sorry, I just literally repeated what you said. Any with more words.
I have a lot of thoughts on dialogue tags.
More words.
Do you want to like ask another really specific question, or do you just want me to?
No, I'm just gonna surrender and just let you go, because there's no. Look, Laura, there's no reason to put reins on a Mustang. You just let the Mustang run.
Wow. Did you just call me a horse?
No, I called you a Mustang, which is a huge compliment because
Okay.
they're fun to watch run. So you just
Okay.
let them run.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So dialogue tags. Um, First, dialogue tags. Um, when you are using them, different people have different thoughts about how to use a good dialogue tag. Personally, as a reader, I hate he said, she said, they said. It it feels completely unnecessary to me.
But Laura, the
Once,
common wisdom is only use he said, she said, they. That's the common wisdom. The
yes.
common wisdom.
So common wisdom was created before a lot of writers started really focusing on the voice of their characters. If you have very distinct voices to your characters, and I'm not saying all writers do this,
I was about to
please
say
don't,
that was a blanket statement. That was a pretty.
please do not persecute me for this.
You're gonna get letters.
I am.
Email Laura. Don't email. I didn't say that. Keep going. I'm sorry.
You can email me, but you better make sure your dialogue is good, or I'm going to edit
You better have some
my
creative
green,
tags in that dialogue. Yeah.
with a green pen and edit back to you.
Yeah.
Send you my edits with my thoughts. Okay,
When
so
Laura falsely expressed that blah 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 blah, I
really,
said to myself in an aggravated tone, I can't believe she said that out loud. Anyway, sorry. Keep going.
okay, so dialogue tags. If your dialogue is good and you have very distinct voices, you do not need a tag on every single line, especially if your characters are witty and bantering and moving the pace of the conversation along. Put them in when somebody's starting to get confused. If you have 5 or 6 lines, throw it in once. You don't need it every single time. Also, it does not always have to be said. There are lots of other words. Please use your thesaurus. Shouted, whispered, grumbled, sighed, right? Like all of these are very action oriented words that allow the reader to feel what the character is feeling. But please, please, please do not say said angrily. I just have no words.
Yeah, you are an avid Stephen King fan.
Yes, I am. I am. The
So
Stephen King fans
Ly
do.
words are
Yes,
the devil.
I don't like the ly words because
Yeah.
it's just one more element that the user has to parse. The reader has to parse. I'm going to start a drinking game. How many times I use user instead of reader?
That's right. Yes.
So
Sorry. For those who are just coming to this podcast for the first time, Laura and I both work for a tech company. So we talk a lot about users on our daily life. And then we come here and we're like, readers, users, user readers, readers that use while they read your books. Anyway, that's not a good
users that
thing.
read, well,
Users that read while they use your books to do what? I don't know. Oh, man.
oh, we have
Okay. So
lots of time together this week.
yeah. So no,
Okay,
yeah, we've spent so
so
much time together this week. So not, that's sorry, listener. That's what you're dealing with. Is Laura and I have had a stressful week at work, and we spent a lot of time together. So we're
I wonder
both
how many people have
a
turned
little
the
punch.
podcast off at this point.
I don't know. Nobody. We're fantastic. So
Well,
not always using said,
we
and
don't always have to say.
we've talked about speed bumps and being strategic with dialogue tags. And I want to go into that. I want to talk about dialogue tags in the middle of a
Yes,
sentence for a second.
in the middle of a sentence.
So most of the time when I'm working with an author and I'm editing their work, they're using dialogue tags in the middle of the sentence to try to create a sense of creativity, right? Like to try to sound artful. Now, I know that sounds diminishing and belittling. I'm not intending to, right? Like, I get it. Your book needs to have a feel and a flow to it. And, the repetitive, I don't like that, he said. Well, I don't like it either, she said. Well, I think we should figure something else out, he said. Well, I think we should also figure something else out, she said. Well, I think we should put these dialogue tags at the end of everything, he said. And I think that too, she said. Like if that's your book and you're reading it that way, you're like, okay, let's take some of these and pepper them into the middle of sentences just to make a distinguishment distinguishment, that's a word, to make a distinguishment in how it sounds. So we don't that's not why we use, like, we don't want to be making decisions about where we put speed bumps to vary the feel of the road, right? Like, nobody likes to drive on a road like that. We want to put them strategically where we want drivers to slow down, in the same way that we want to put them strategically where we want readers to slow down. So putting a dialogue tag in the middle can be super strategic, especially if your character is having like an emotive moment, right? So if your character is like, let's say your character is really struggling to say what they're going to say, and they're like, I just don't know. It's hard for me right now. I I'm struggling and I'm anxious, right? Like, I'm expressing the emotions in that like cadence pattern of my speech, not through the words, but just through the like choppiness of the language. Now, if we're on a video, you can watch my facial expressions, you can watch me do that, you can hear the choppiness of my words, you can feel the cadence. Translating that into words, dialogue tags can be a really great tool for that. I just don't know, he said as he looked off to the side. It's hard for me right now. He fiddled with the Legos in his hands while he channeled his anxiety. Looking back up to the crowd, he said, I'm just anxious, right? Like, so placing those speed bumps strategically, you start to feel the varied speech pattern there, and it brings out the anxiety I want you to feel around that character talking. Does that make sense? That's how I like to use them.
Absolutely. And what I really like about what you just described is that it helps us understand the reader's experience. We are taught to read as children, right? We're taught punctuation, we're taught sentence structure, we're taught how to parse language. As adults, most of us don't have to think that quotation means somebody starts talking. Our brains are really kind of amazing, and they just see those two little sort of curvy lines at the top of the line, and we just know, oh, somebody's
Oh,
talking, right?
it's
Like,
coming out the mouth. Yeah.
right? We don't have to think about it. So let your readers not think about things and just enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
Every time you use a punctuation mark, you use a dialogue tag, you do something to interrupt what your character is saying, you're making your reader think. You're making their brain neurons fire or something. I don't know how the brain works,
Mhm.
but you're making them work harder than they need to, so they're being pulled away from your story. That's why you want them, when they've started talking, if they're not going to stop, don't stop them. To use Jeff's analogy, don't put a speed bump somewhere where you don't want a speed bump. In Jeff's analogy, he also, metaphor, simile, example.
Wisdom.
In Jeff's sage advice,
Oh,
he has shown us that if somebody is struggling to get their thoughts out, we slow the reader down by putting those tags in there. Now, where I would, if I were editing Jeff's example as an editor, in that moment where the first part was, well, I'm just not sure, he said, I would actually make it, he struggled,
yeah.
or he struggled to find the words,
Yeah.
because now I've given the user the emotional, I mean, we are experiencing what Jeff's experiencing, because I'm not saying he said, I'm saying he did this thing. I created an action item, which is drawing the reader back in.
Yeah.
Then Jeff speaks a little bit more. I don't have to say, and then he said, right? Like, just put the quotation marks in there again, because that allows us to know we haven't left the paragraph yet. We were all taught in whatever grade they teach us how quotation marks work, that new paragraph means new person speaking.
Mhm.
If you only have two people speaking, dialogue tags at the beginning, dialogue tag in the middle where it gets a little bit, we've been a couple of exchanges in, and then again when you're transitioning out of the banter.
Yeah.
If you have a slow emotional scene where both people are like struggling with the conversation, you can use them a lot. You can use them at the beginning, you can use them at the end, you can use them in the middle, like Jeff's saying, but otherwise they just get in the way.
Yeah,
Don't
they're
slow
in.
your readers down.
Yeah, and I think what we're both saying is be strategic.
Yes.
I'll also say when you're putting them in the middle like that, a nice thing to pair with those dialogue tags is body language that
Mm.
communicates the emotive state of the person speaking. So, if you're trying to slow, we get a lot of, and I think it's just something in the cultural like zeitgeist. Look at that word. Something in
I've
the
never heard
cultural
of that word.
something in the cultural ethos. Ooh, I'm
I'm
bringing
looking
up
that
all
down.
the big words today. I'm probably using both of those wrong. Something in the cultural milieu right now is that we like these lone wolf, strong, silent type characters, right? Like we just like to use them.
Mm.
So, um, putting that like using dialogue tags strategically for a strong silent type character, pairing it with body language to like slow that character down communicates that kind of like old Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry, like make my day punk. It communicates that kind of like
He commanded.
silent, strong, silent type. What'd you say?
He commanded.
He commanded. Make my day, punk, he commanded as he put his fingers on the butt of his gun and stared at the other person menacingly, right? Like, so you're putting that like body language in there to like communicate the emotional tone of the moment when you don't have, when your character doesn't have the words to put in their mouth. Right, like and that's kind of the problem that I'm talking around is like when you have one of those strong silent type characters, you don't have the words to put in their mouth to make them sound strong and to convey the emotions they're feeling. So pair your dialogue tags with body language in order to substitute for those words. Yeah. What else you got?
I mean, that sums it up with dialogue tags.
Oh, I got more.
Don't use them
Don't
if you
use it.
don't have to. When you do have to, use them strategically.
Yeah. So let's talk about when you absolutely have to use them, because there are
Mm,
times where you absolutely have to use them.
yes.
First one is in a big cast scene.
Yes.
If you've got 4 to 5 characters talking, and I define a big cast scene as 3 or more, right? Because there's actually big cast scenes and then there's crowd scenes. So like 3 to 5 characters are a big cast scene. You get over 5 characters, you're now in a crowd scene, which we can talk about the difference between those. I will talk about dialogue tags in a crowd scene in a second. Are you shaking your head at me like no,
No,
that's not a
I'm
crowd?
actually shaking my head yes to say we should probably do a podcast about um, big cast scenes and crowd scenes in general. But
Yeah,
that
2 on 2, big cast and crowd.
yeah,
Coming to a podcast near you. Jeff and Laura talk about the different types of dialogue scenes. Yeah, we'll put that on the list of Q&As to do.
yeah.
So, but with dialogue tags, you have to let your reader know what character is speaking, and unless your character has a crazy voice, you're not going to be able to tell with each line which character is which character. I know that's the ideal. The ideal is like my characters' voices are so different that with every line I can tell who's speaking. And it's just it's unrealistic. It's an unrealistic expectation of your character's voice. We want character's voice to sound different. We want them to feel different. But if you've got 3 people talking, you're going to have lines in there that could go with 2 of them.
Hmm.
There's just going to be crossover. So just be aware that you're going to have to use dialogue tags. So be strategic with how those dialogue tags line up to those character voices. For a fast talking character who's got short sentences and gives us like 5 to 6 sentences at a time, right? So you get that like machine gun rapid fire Joe Pesci type talk, right? Like, am I a clown? You laughing at me? Is it funny? Am I a clown? You think it's funny? You think it's funny to laugh at me? Right? Like you want to put his dialogue tag, like Laura was saying, at the end. And if you pair him with like a Ray Liotta, who's a more like contemplative but explosive talker, most of the time you're going to have like 2 to 3 sentences at a time. The sentences are going to be a little bit longer, and you may want to force a dialogue tag in between his 2 sentences to like differentiate his pace from Joe Pesci. And then if you're throwing in like a grunter who like doesn't talk at all and who's like shrugging a lot, make sure you're giving that grunter equal space with dialogue lines like, and Benny shrugged, right? Like, so that you're feeling, but when you've got those big cast scenes, you're going to have to use them. You're going to have to be strategic with how you use them and get excited about that, because you can use them to really differentiate the voices in your cast. Yeah.
Yes, that's all of that. And when you're talking in a group, not everyone has the same amount of airtime. Sometimes two people are dominating the conversation and a third is just kind of listening, which is why when they start to speak up, having their dialogue tag right there is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the next several exchanges, everybody gets a dialogue tag again.
Yep.
Mhm.
And make sure you don't lose that character in the conversation, right? Like I always try to say, like in a big cast scene with dialogue, if 3 characters are talking and one of them is silent and just sitting there, every once in a while reference their body language,
Mhm.
just to kind of like remind the reader. So if you have like character A, B, and C is the quiet character, you can have like, A said, B said, A said, B said, A said, B said, C rolled his eyes. A said, B. Oh, we're 20 minutes.
That's
A
20 minutes.
said, B
Okay,
said.
so let me give an example of this.
Yeah.
You have two parents talking and a child is in the room.
Yeah.
Children often do not interrupt when their parents, especially if their parents are having some kind of argument.
That's right. Good children like mine don't interrupt unless I call on them with my whistle.
Your children never speak unless spoken to. They are seen and
unless
not heard.
unless like I and the sound of music stand up and blow my whistle and then they
Yeah.
line. None of this is true, by the way. My children are super verbose. They talk all.
The only thing that's sort of true is you have almost as many children as he did.
It's
Okay,
true.
we have to finish. So let me, okay, so you have
I have
two,
a whole nother point to make. Keep going.
well, you have to make it really fast. So, okay, so you have the two parents talking and the child isn't interrupting. The parents, even if the child isn't talking or you aren't saying that the child is fidgeting, you can say the parent said this and then looked at the child to
Yeah.
make sure that the child was still listening or that the
Yeah.
child was okay, right? Like it doesn't always have to be voices, but you always have to acknowledge all of the people in the room. Otherwise, it's super, super weird for the reader to have somebody just creeping and lurking.
Yeah.
Great example of this is in one of Jeff's Mo books. Mo and Stacy go to some very rich dude's house, and
Yeah.
there's a butler who is just in the room.
He just be creeping.
In, in the first time I read and edited this, I was like, is he still there? Is he
I
gone?
know.
Is he,
I kept, and I actually, as a writer, kept forgetting that he was in the room. Which,
I know. As an editor, I figured that. So like, be your own editor. Either put him in the scene
yeah.
and say he deferred to someone else instead
Yep.
of he said, right? Like think about again, I could keep having to go back to this.
Well, and the edit you made was you had Mo like look at him to see if he was going to speak every once in a while,
Yeah,
and he never does. But
right.
she's like looking over at him, like, is he going to talk? Yeah.
Right. Is he still here? Is he still part of this conversation?
She's
Should he
still.
be listening? Should we
Yeah.
ask him to leave? Right.
So he creeps. Yeah. Sorry.
And also, don't be afraid to make somebody leave if it's like
Oh yeah.
parents
Get
are
him out.
yelling. Kids don't stand there and
Get
watch.
him out of the
They
scene.
go hide.
Yeah.
Tell your reader that your child goes and hides.
Your child left. Get out of there. And I actually think that was the ultimate solution for the butler, was we just added a line where it's like, and the butler closed the door and left. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, now we don't have to like, why is this weird guy standing in the corner? Yeah. Anyway.
Anyway, it's a
Yeah.
good book. Go read it.
So last thing to say about dialogue tags is that we want to place them. Another time you want to place your dialogue tag at the front of a sentence is when you're introducing a character into the conversation for the first time.
Mm.
So if a character is in the room, but they haven't spoken for 3 to 4 lines, and it's the first time they're going to speak, let the reader know that they're entering the conversation, right? Like, so just instead of like, yeah, I agree with what Billy said, Amber said, or yeah, I agree with what Billy said, Amber interjected, right? What you're doing by putting that first utterance of Amber at the end is you're making the reader for a millisecond rewind the line and hear it in a new voice. So
Mm.
don't make your reader rewind. Please be kind. Don't make your reader
Amber
rewind.
interjected,
Not on a
I
t-shirt.
agree with Billy.
Yeah, right. Like just put it up front so that the reader's like,
Amber
oh, I'm
spoke
about to
up.
hear Amber's voice. Yeah,
Amber hesitated before entering the conversation. I think Billy might be right.
yeah.
Or
Um,
Bobby, who was it she was agreeing with? They were agreeing with? Doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't. It was an example off the top of my
It was
head.
a good
It's not important.
example, but then
Why?
I lost the example.
Thank you.
Also,
Um,
good point. I never think about that because I'm not the writer, I'm just the editor.
yeah, and it's one of those things of like, we want to make we want to make the experience of our book. If we think of our book as an experience, we're taking the writer on, the reader on,
Reader
not the
on.
writer, not
No.
the
I mean,
user, not
and
the
that's
writer,
you were
the
the
reader,
writer and you are writing a book for your own amusement
for
and
your own
enjoyment,
amusement,
which
and
is
it's just for
totally
you.
fine.
Then you're the writer reader, writer
User,
reader user.
editor,
So, and the
publisher,
editor and the publisher, we wear so many
merchandiser.
hats, y'all. It's terrifying. So take it. You want to rewind. Okay, so you want to take the reader on an experience and you want to make that experience as smooth and easy for the reader as possible, right? Because when something is a chore, we don't want to do it. So if we want the reader to like read our book from cover to cover, make it easy. And using dialogue tags strategically is one of those ways that you can make it easy to do. You can make your reader feel like they're just on a journey with your book. Yeah. Anyway,
Excellent.
anything else we want to say about dialogue tags?
No, this might be the shortest podcast we've ever done.
Yeah, winning. Mm. Yeah,
If you have any questions about dialogue tags, put them in the comments below. I don't know how to check them. I don't have an account, but Jeff does, and he'll ask me, and I will tell him what to write, or
yeah,
he'll just write them. I mean, he doesn't always need me.
yeah. Or you can just hit us up at dialoguedoctor.com. We answer questions there too. There's a little chat box. You can just ask me a chat, and I have it on all the time, even during my day job. Don't tell my boss. That's funny because Laura's my boss. That's why that joke is funny.
Funny,
So
so funny. Um, or join the Slack channel. We can have a whole conversation about it on the
yeah,
Slack
we can
channel.
talk about dialogue tags all day about the Slack channel.
Talk about it.
I'm really trying to think. So we've talked about. Let me recap real quick, just to make sure there's not anything we missed.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about not always using the word I said, but also avoiding ly words because use your thesaurus. We talked about speed bumps. We talked about the strategic use and speed bumps. We talked about why we use them at the back to keep dialogue moving quickly, at the front to introduce a character or to slow the pace down, or in the middle to create an emotional moment or to communicate that a character is not speaking. And we talked about how to use them in a big cast scene, crowd scene. We didn't talk about crowd scenes. So when you've got more than 5 characters and you're doing dialogue tags, you're going to need to group some of those characters together. Right. So if you think of your characters in a big crowd scene where there's like 7 or 8 speakers at one time, you want to start grouping them into people who are responding in the same way. And so think about your dialogue tags in that way. And then it becomes less strategic about how the voice feels because you're actually talking about a crowd voice. And I just recommend always putting them at the front. So an example of this might be like James announced to his friend group, I am now leaving and I am taking my ball with me and the game is over. You're a jerk, Sally said. Billy and Jimmy shrugged, right? Like I'm grouping Billy and Jimmy together and I'm
Oh,
putting it at the front. I don't want to be like, you know, Oh, come on, Billy and Jimmy said. I mean, that works too, but I like to group that crowd up front.
Yeah. So
Would
the
you
other
push back
thing,
on that?
so the only other thing that I would say about that is grouping, yes. But if you have a crowd, you don't need to give every piece of dialogue coming from the crowd a
Mm-mm.
tag. Don't go, please stay,
Yeah.
take the ball if you want to.
Oh,
We
that's a
don't
great
need
point.
you, right? Like that can all come from the crowd. It doesn't matter in a crowd because most of the time, if you're looking at a big crowd, you have no idea who's saying what.
Yeah.
So who cares?
Unless there's a fun line in the middle of that, which is like, you know, fine. We oh man, that stinks. Oh, go leave the ball. You go. And then all of a sudden we want somebody to yell like, Jimmy sucks. Right. You may want to like say who said that because that's funny and we want to attribute it to a character so that we can all like
Mm-hmm.
connect with that character in that moment.
Yeah.
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 So that, see, it started out as you should always use it. And then we got to an accept because
Yeah.
every rule has an exception.
Well, and it's like I tell my kids all the time, the words never and always are never true. Um,
But they're always something. I
but
don't
they're
know.
always
I don't know. I
used.
feel like we need to work that out so we can put it on a t-shirt.
We'll workshop that. We'll workshop that. The t-shirt from this week is going to be please be kind, don't make your reader rewind. That's gonna be the t-shirt this
Oh,
week.
that's pretty good.
Boom. Got it.
Pretty
Yeah.
good. How about one that has a dialogue tag that says, Jeff said something some way with the ly, and then there's a green pen line through it
Yeah,
that,
because you
and
only edit
then
in green pen. See, people need to understand that. Laura only edits in green pen. So there's a lot of green
or
ink.
pencil. Lots of times I like to edit in pencil
Lots of times. It's true. Yeah.
because I like to erase things.
Yeah, I like that too because I can erase all your notes and be like, I finished this page.
Yep. All right, that's it. We gotta go because Jeff's talking about erasing me. So this here ends the
Here ends the podcast.
dialogue tag podcast. Laura commanded.
I'm going to stop the recording.